This is Support is Sexy, episode 391, with playwright, producer, and visionary, Trey Anthony. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you here. It just would not be the same without you. And if you are a woman entrepreneur, a creative, a woman who has a message and who wants to share that message with the world, do it with podcasting. I'm telling you, there's no better platform right now than podcasting. And by being a guest, you can get in front of thousands, if not millions of people all around the world. Now, if you want to be an unforgettable guest for all the right reasons, I want you to download my free gift at girlonpodcastgift.com. That's girlonpodcastgift.com. Free download, 10 ways to be an unforgettable podcast guest. It's a guide offering you some tips, telling you why podcasting or being a podcast guest is great for you and for your business. girlonpodcastgift.com. Now, this episode, this is a woman who really is about her message, Trey Anthony. Such a powerful episode. Thank you so much, Trey, for being so open about your story and sharing your journey. I know it's going to inspire a lot of women. But what Trey talks about, among many other things in this episode, is the importance of, say it with me, support. All about support and the pain sometimes of those of us who are the quote unquote strong one in our families, our communities, among our friends, the pains we go through to ask for and accept support. You know, I'm all about it. So her message really resonated with me since support is what I'm pushing around here. But Trey talks about how she learned the hard way that not asking for support is dangerous to you, to your mental, to your physical wellness, all kinds of ways that not asking for support can affect you in your life. She also talks about getting over imposter syndrome, pushing yourself to say yes to opportunities outside of your comfort zone, and something else that I love. She talks about how to turn your mess into your message, but also that could potentially become a part of your business, which is what we talk about around here. Entrepreneurship, how to create businesses that really align with who we are and where we're going. Trey talks about her journey to discover that and how she aligned her message into her business. All right, so I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Also, make sure you listen until the end because Trey has this incredible planner that you're going to want to know more about, and you're going to want to get a copy. And I have one to send to you. So I want you to listen to the end to make sure you find out how you can get your copy of this beautiful planner. She has it illustrated, tons of great information. If you're listening to this in real time, it's the beginning of the year. Now is the time to get a free planner. So make sure you listen and find out more about that. All right, so now here we go with Trey Anthony. So Trey, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Thank you for having me, Elaine. I'm very excited.
Oh, great. So our first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
I would say I've always been in love with entrepreneurship because of my family. My family is West Indian, and that running joke about Jamaicans having 10 jobs was really quite true in my family. Like everybody had 10 jobs, and you were expected to have a job as soon as you could walk and speak. And so I grew up with a grandmother who, always had a little side hustle, and we were always expected to chip in. So if it was, my grandmother used to do something, she was very spiritual as well. And so she would do things around like reading tea leaves for the neighbors. And we were expected to make sure that we grew the plants in the backyard and gathered them for her. And she would then read the tea leaves for the neighbors. My mom used to run like a little barbershop for the kids in the building. And she would cut all of the young boys' hair. And so we were expected to recruit them and let people know that mom had a little side hustle, right?
Right.
So it was that kind of thing. So I always grew up just knowing. I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs who would say that their family would be like, oh, you can't go into business for yourself. My family was quite the opposite. It was kind of like, of course you should work for yourself. And this is the way you should be self-sufficient. And even if you have a quote unquote real job, you always want to be working for yourself. So it's something that I've always just decided that I wanted to do or was expected to do.
It's so interesting because it's, well, I have one of my best friends is Jamaican and she has a work ethic like no other. So I know about that. But it's interesting that your family encouraged you to do that at a young age or years ago, as I'm sure there are others who have done that. I feel like now that's very much a part of a lot of our consciousness. But when I was younger, the thing was, find a good job, and that was it. You're going to have a good job until you retire. So many people thought that. We all know differently now, but I think it's so important to consider that when thinking about your children or just young people in your life now. Even if you have a great job, even as an adult, have a great job, get a great job that you love, you still could and maybe even should have something else of your own on the side. Do you think so?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is just something that it's so important to have, because I think it just gives you a sense of how you move through the world, this sense of independence. And for me, like everyone in my family, like I said, like my grandmother had a side hustle, my mom had a side hustle, my mother's sister, my aunt had her own hairdressing salon, and I used to work there. So I just knew like this is what we did as a business. And it gave us, I think, the women in our family, that we moved in a way that was very independent of the men. And that's kind of how I grew up, of like, my grandmother used to always say, a woman should always have a separate bank account and a man's not supposed to know about it, right? And that kind of thing. So I always grew up in that way of like, I know I'm supposed to take care of myself, and that's an expectation. And how you take care of yourself is creating business and work for yourself.
Now, did you grow up actually in Jamaica, or were you born there and then you moved elsewhere?
I was actually born in England. And I moved to Canada when I was 12 years old. But my grandmother always owned a home in Jamaica. So we went back to Jamaica very regularly. Like I would go sometimes for the summers. I would go at least once or twice a year. So people are always very shocked that I'm not Jamaican, that I wasn't born in Jamaica. And my grandmother, she just spoke to us as if and acted as if we were supposed to still be living in Jamaica. Right. So that's kind of my influence. And so usually when people ask me, like, what's your background? I say I'm Jamaican, but I'm a little bit of a Jamaican fraud because I wasn't actually born there.
No,
but
you're still Jamaican.
Yes. But I feel very connected to the culture and to the people and to the language. And that's what I know. So that's always been my first thing to say I'm Jamaican.
So now you're in Toronto, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what would you say, though, a young Trey was like growing up in England and then in Canada? What were you like as a young person?
So I would say I've always been the type who was very inquisitive. I was always the type of person who asked why. I was always the person, I'm sure my mother would say, challenged everything. Like I never took things at face value. And I also was the type of person who definitely would say, if something's not working, then why can't we change it? I was never one to believe in, this is the way it's been done, so this is the way we're going to continue to do it. I've never been that child. I've always kind of been like, this just doesn't seem to work. This doesn't make sense to me. And we can obviously see it's not working the way we've been doing it, so why can't we change it? And I also was a really avid reader. Like I love to read. I have vivid memories of my grandmother when we were in England. Every Friday night we went to the library and I was supposed to take out 4 books. And those books needed to be read over the weekend and then we returned them. And so I always had my nose in a book reading. And so I was very caught up in fantasy of reading all of these books. And usually it'd be like little white girls and, being kissed by a prince and stuff. But I was always very big on that of being a big reader and learning. And my father was a person who also really wanted us we would read the newspaper every day. And he would ask me questions about it when I was very young. And I think in some ways it worked to my advantage that I feel like the adults around me really treated me in a way of they had high expectations of me, and they responded to me more as an adult more than a child, which worked to my advantage and sometimes to my disadvantage. But I always got the message of like, you're very smart and you're really intelligent. And my grandmother used to say, you know, you're very book smart, and Trey's got a good head on her shoulders. And so I grew up with that messaging all of the time, that my ideas and opinions mattered.
Now, how do you feel like it was in the ways where it worked to your advantage and the ways that it didn't? And I ask because it's interesting that you said that, because I feel like I wasn't an only child, but I was the youngest and separated by 17 years from my sister. And my mom always says, "Oh, we just thought you were okay because you were so mature and you were this." Because I talk about I was lonely when I was younger and this and that, and we just thought you were okay. So there's ways that they treat you as an adult, like you said, it can work to your advantage, but then there's other ways that it may not.
Oh, definitely. I think for me, the biggest disadvantage was when we moved from England. We had a big extended family with my grandmother, uncles, aunts all around. And then when I moved to Canada, my mom was now a single mom, and we moved into Toronto housing, which is a housing project. And my mother was working 3 jobs, and I was the oldest. And I had a brother and a sister. And my job was to basically look after them and look after the household. And so there was a level of responsibility placed on me at a very young age, like I was 12, and basically running the household and very independent and helping my brother with his schoolwork, then plus doing my homework, having very adult conversations with teachers because my mother couldn't show up for these things because she was working. And I felt very much, in retrospect now, I think a lot of pressure to really hold down the household and look after the family and make my mother feel proud and that I was responsible, when I think I was really scared. And that was something I think then later manifested itself in my life as being someone who wouldn't ask for support. So it's funny that I'm now doing support.
That's right. There's all kinds of reasons that we don't realize that we've been conditioned to not ask for support.
Yeah, that you don't ask for support. Or people will say to me all of the time in my family, well, I just thought you got it. I just knew that you were okay. You've always been the strong one, the responsible one.
Right.
And so I found it very hard. And even now, it's something that I struggle with, to be able to say to people, I actually need help. It would really be really great if you could support me through this. Or I actually don't have all the answers. But I think that's how it worked for me as a young child. And then it, of course, then showed up in very adult behavior.
So what are the ways, thank you for sharing that with us and being open about that. What would you say are the ways then that you have found now that and it's a journey for all of us, we're all still trying to figure it out, but how do you go about reminding yourself that you deserve support, and then the ways you go about asking for it now?
A lot of therapy, girl.
Right. Amen.
A lot of therapy. And it's also in a way of my own self journey around what love looks like for me, of being really kind and gentle with myself. And I'm a big advocate around writing and writing your feelings and being vulnerable, which was something that was very hard for me, be it in business or be it in relationships and friendships, to be vulnerable and not to always be that go-to girl. And so now it's this way of how I do self-care for myself, is trying to set up support systems for myself. It's around saying to myself that it's okay to say no, that I'm going to disappoint people in order to stay true to myself. That's something that I had to remind myself of constantly, because I also was a pleaser. Like, I loved to please people. I loved, it was a message that I got from, my family, of getting that pat on the back of, oh, you're the one that we can always count on. And so that traveled throughout my life. So even when I was tired, even when I was run down, I still was like, oh yeah, I can do it. No problem. Sure. Why not? Right. And I think it wasn't until, later on in my career, when I was in the hospital at age 34 with heart palpitations and about to have a heart attack, there was something where I was like, whoa, this has to shift. You can't be that person anymore, Right.
What was it that brought you to that point where you ended up in the hospital? Was it just a stressful time in your life?
It was ironic enough. I was running, I had gotten a TV show. I was doing nearly 12 to 14 hours at the TV studio. My grandmother was terminally ill, and so I was the caregiver for her, and I had moved her and my mother into my home. And then all during that, I then decided to open a wellness center for women. Right?
Wow.
And so I had this place called the Wellness Center where stressed out women were supposed to come and, take care of themselves and do yoga, do classes, and you
created the center that you needed at the time, right? Which is what we do. Create the program that you need.
Exactly. So I was like, oh, this sounds like a great idea. I would love to do this. And then I was distressed. And so I was running all of these things and also doing way too much. Like I was acting in the show, producing the show, writing the show. And then I was doing things that I had no business doing, like sitting in the editing suite with the editor because I wanted to make sure that he was doing his job properly. And it was during one of those days when I was sitting in the editing suite with the editor, which I had no business doing because I'm not an editor. Mm-hmm. And I felt my heart I just felt this really tight feeling in my heart. And they rushed me to the emergency. And even during that, Elaine, I was getting checked and I was hooked up to all of these monitors. And I still had my BlackBerry and I was checking my BlackBerry. And the doctor came in and yelled at me. And he said, put that shit down.
Right.
And he was like, what are you doing? He said, do you realize that you're in the middle of, I think, perhaps having a heart attack?
And you're like, I got to check my messages.
Yes. And I'm running a wellness center and I want to make sure the staff showed up for yoga.
Oh, my gosh. And that just shows how committed we are to, how committed. Sometimes when I went through this workshop called Momentum years ago, they sort of taught us language around or being aware of just saying, well, I'm committed. And it's like, committed to what? That's the thing, right? And I used to think, right. So it's just like you were committed. But what you're committed to, the thing that's really doing you in literally at this point?
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it's to remind ourselves that we're not superwomen.
Right.
And I think for me, especially because I got that messaging around having a single mom and saw all that she did with little to nothing and how she made it work, I kept saying, well, you are like an educated person. You're making a great income. You should be able to make all of this work because your mother made it work with less than you. Mm-hmm, right. So that was something also that also made me feel very guilty of, well, too much who is given, much is required. Right. So I kept doing way too much.
Way too much. Now, was this after your play? Because you had to play The Kink in My Hair, which I was going to talk about. You created an award-winning play, which went on to go on television. Is that the show that you were working on?
Exactly. Yes.
Now,
so, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say about the play. I had created the play out of a necessity because I had started to think about I wanted to do theater and I wanted to do acting, and I had started out doing stand-up, and out of stand-up I started doing comedy sketches, and then it led me to writing the kink in my hair.
Okay, so I was going to ask if writing, I know you mentioned you love now or advising people to write things down and the power of writing things down. Did writing become a part of your life before you knew exactly what you were going to do with it?
Yes, definitely. I've always been a big journaler. I love to journal. I have journals from when I was like 11, 12 years old, stacks and stacks of journals. And so I've always been a person who, was very dramatic in my feelings. And so I would write them down of like what was going on for me. And my grandmother also really loved me to tell stories. She was a storyteller herself, and she loved like dramatic storytelling. And so she really encouraged me to do that, or, to recite what was happening in the family and to give her a play-by-play. And so I grew up in people who enjoyed me telling stories. And that was something that I was encouraged to do, and writing was one of them. And my grandmother used to tell me, I think she had a dream for me to be a singer, and I was an awful singer. To this day, I can't hold a note. but she always encouraged me to write songs and to sing them. And so that's kind of what I did. And so it started out from journaling to writing songs, and then to writing sketches, and then to writing a play. But the kink really came about. It was journal entries in my diary that led to the kink.
So tell us a little bit about the kink in my hair and how it evolved over time.
The kink in my hair really was a story that, as I said, I was Jamaican. I was engaged at that time to get married. I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, and we had a wonderful relationship, had been together 7 years, and my family, everybody was invested in this relationship. I was invested in this relationship. Everybody was. And then I met a woman at work, and I fell in love with a woman at work. And of course, it was one of those things where people were just like, what? And we're Jamaican. And I don't like to say Jamaicans are more homophobic than any other people or race or anything else, but I will say my family is very homophobic. I will talk for only my family.
So
right?
The person you were engaged to from high school was a male?
Yes.
Okay.
Was a man, yeah.
And then you met this woman at work and you fell in love with, and your family is confused. Got it.
Totally confused. And I was pretty much banished from the family. Like my grandmother said she wouldn't talk to me. My mother was having a really hard time. And I started to go to therapy and trying to work out all of this, of really this big, huge fall from grace, because I was always the golden child, the one who did everything right. And so to have my family totally turn their back against me was a lot. It really was a lot for me to handle. And so I was going to therapy. I was writing away my life. And one of the monologues that actually, it was a journal entry that turned into a monologue, was one of the monologues dealt with a woman talking to her mother. And it was like this love letter that I had written to my mother saying, you know, you always told me to be the person who stands up for their own rights and be true to themselves. And this is the time I'm the most true to myself. And yet you never told me that in order to be true to myself, it would be punishment from you. And that was one of the first kind of entries I wrote, and it became this play. Like I started writing about all of the messaging that I had gotten. So there was a monologue dealing with the whole thing of shadeism in the Black community. I mentioned to you that I was always the smart one, but I also was the darkest one in my family. My family comes from St. Elizabeth in Jamaica, where there's a lot of shadeism and a lot of weights put on light-skinned children, you know? And so I grew up with this messaging where my grandmother would be like, thank God you're smart because you're not light, right? So
in my family, it used to be, don't go out in the sun too much. You don't want to get too dark. And it's like, I'm already dark. So it's like you're saying, I don't want to get worse than what you think I already am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there was a monologue dealing with that. There was another monologue dealing with incest. And that was something that had really been very prevalent in our family, and nobody spoke about it. Everybody knew the uncle who you weren't supposed to be in a room with by themselves, but was still invited to the Christmas dinner, those kind of things. And it really was a play that women said that they came and saw themselves. There was another monologue dealing with suicide, where a woman who was like the woman who had it all, who was just like, you know, I'm scared. And what if I told you that I'm not that go-to person? Who would you think I am? And it was a lot of my own feelings, but also a lot of me just really taking off the mask of myself, but also of the women who were around me. And I kept hearing these stories from friends. I was working at a women's shelter at the time, an abused women's shelter. I was hearing stories from other women, and I just started to create this play. And I didn't know it was going to be a play. I didn't know it was the first play I'd ever written. And I decided to sell tickets, and even that I was kind of like shocked at. I was like, oh, okay. People are going to spend $10 to come and see me do these monologues with a bunch of women. Half of us weren't even real actors. And it just became this thing that took off like a wildfire. We sold out every single night. women were crying in the front row, laughing. Women were writing me emails, just saying, this is the story that really spoke to me. It's the first time as a Black woman. And then we started getting all of these reviews where people were saying it's the modern day for colored girls who considered suicide, and Trey Anthony's the writer for her new generation. And it just became this runaway train that I had no idea. And it got picked up by Mervish Productions, which is our commercial theater in Toronto, which is a 2,000-seat theater. And they programmed it there for 2 weeks. It sold out, and it ran there for 6 months in a 2,000-seat theater. It grossed over $8 million, and then it got optioned for this TV show. And the TV show then made me be the first Black woman to have my own television show in Canada on a major network. So it was just one of those things where I was just like, oh my goodness, I never expected from my pain that so much could happen in my life. So it was one of those moments where I sometimes say to a lot of women, sometimes it's your rock bottom that is really leading you to the top of where you need to be.
Right, especially if you're brave enough to want to record that moment, because sometimes I know, we want to just forget it, not think about it, not share it. But, and you might not share it in the moment, but at least capture it in some way so you can just see your own evolution through it. But in your case, writing, especially as a creative person, and coming up with something out of that, as they say, turning your mess into your message. I think you're such an example of that. And then never knowing how far this thing will take you. As they say, it's happening right for you, not to you. And for you, just this experience that you captured, obviously, in such a passionate and strong way that really resonated with people. And then look how far it has continued to take you.
Yeah, it's been amazing, because even I recently moved to Atlanta about 4 years ago, and just last year, The Kink opened there at Horizon Theater, and that was something that I just never thought would be possible, that it would actually speak to an American audience. And it was there for 6 weeks. It sold out every night. And I think when you come from a place of authenticity, your work will transcend race, it will transcend gender, class, sexuality, you name it. People really just want to hear the truth. And I think a lot of us really want to feel heard and seen. And I think that doesn't have any color, and it doesn't have any gender. All of us are walking around with this thing of, please hear me, please see me, and please just acknowledge that, I'm worthy. And I think that's where the play was always rooted in, and that's where my work is always rooted in, of this need to say, I see you, and you're worthy, and you're not alone.
So what was it like to experience the success and support for that project? But then also, what was it like for you? But then also, what was it like for your family to see what you were experiencing during that time?
It's funny. My family, I think, we come from Jamaicans, my family especially, I will say, of this, you don't air your dirty laundry. Right. Right?
Which is a lot of families.
Right. So it was funny that at first, when I first did the play, there was all of this shock and, oh, you're going to bring shame on the family, right? And then my mother and grandmother became my biggest fans. When it was at Mervish Productions, my grandmother came to the show every single night. And it really gave us a chance as a family to start talking. I think it was the first time as a family we really began to talk about our issues and what they were for us. And it also became the sense of pride for my family, that my grandmother felt a lot of pride, my mother felt a lot of pride, and also too for them to know that my art was also I was being paid, and being paid very well for my art was something that I think my family was shocked at, in that sense of, like, people are actually buying Trey's tickets and paying her a salary and coming out to see this. And so it was a very interesting time for all of us. And I think it was the first time that my mother kind of was just like, wow, she has some talent. Like, I never knew this would be her talent, but this is her talent. Like, I think they all knew I was smart, but I don't think anyone would have said, oh, she's going to make a career out of, as my mother would say, prancing around on stage. That's what she used to say, right?
Right.
And then I think it became a reality for them that people can actually make money as an artist. And that was a very new concept for them. Like, I think they knew as business people, we could make money, but I don't think they ever saw art or creativity as a business. And that was a real shift for them. And it was even a shift for myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you have any challenges at the time of accepting them? Well, I guess it's really forgiving and accepting them for how they caused you to feel during that time when you told them that you were in love with a woman and you know, this is who you are, and then not feeling that acceptance then, but then now that you've created this work, there's more space for conversations around all of those things. What was that process like, if you're willing to share?
Yeah, I think for my family, it's always been a work of in progress. You know, we're not a family who were like, oh, let's go to the therapist and work this out and go to family counseling. We are not that family. Mm-hmm. I was the one who was always championing, I'm going to therapy. I need to work this out. Let's talk. And I think if there's one thing, and it's something that I have to remind myself of all of the time, is my mother parents how she was parented. And she knows what she knows. And she does her best. And sometimes in her best, it fails me quite drastically sometimes. But I'm learning to be as forgiving of my mother as I am forgiving of myself. And that has been something where it's a challenge every single day. And it's one of the most challenging relationships that I do have is with my mother. But it also provides me with my biggest stories, my biggest sharing of myself, my biggest truth telling, my biggest insight to my own self of who I am, because I'm very much my mother's daughter in a lot of ways. And so sometimes I feel in order to forgive her, I need to forgive me, and I need to forgive my grandmother. And it's a process every single day to learn how to communicate with these women who are such dynamic forces in my life and who have shaped so much of me and who have made me who I am. And they have given me their biggest love and support, but have also hurt me in ways that have been my biggest hurt. Mm-hmm. And I think they have taught me how to love and how to forgive and how to be strong and how to be independent and all of those things. But the relationship, I will say without any doubt, is always a challenge. And I don't like to affirm that, like even right, because I'm big on what you put out. Right. But I do try to say, you know, I affirm every single day my love with my mother and myself is easy and calm. And some days it is, and some days it surely isn't. Mm-hmm.
It's on some days it is, and some days it's on its way to being there. Yeah. It's not quite there, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. It's it's a very loving approach to take to it. That's why I was curious about, because sometimes I think we can get stuck in, and, you know, for different reasons, rightfully so, maybe stuck in the anger or the hurt and those kinds of things. And I think I'm a big advocate of therapy for sure, and all the other ways that we need to heal ourselves and move beyond things that could just open up space for who knows what. But as you said, it's for everything. It's a work in progress.
For sure. Definitely.
Now, in your fantastic TEDx talk in Toronto, which I told you I watched already twice, you talked about coming out of your box and how the quote unquote call can sometimes when you're not even ready. So I was curious for you, tell us about the moment that your call came before you felt ready and how you responded.
I think for me, it was around writing the play. I never felt equipped to do what I did. For the longest time, the labeling of saying I was a playwright and also saying I was a businesswoman and saying I was a creative, I didn't feel like I could own any of those things. and I felt somewhat like a fraud. And I felt like maybe I was just this one-hit wonder, or how dare I say that when there's people who've gone to, fancy schools and universities to learn to write a play, and here I am with this, record-breaking box office hits.
Right. Imposter syndrome, big time.
Exactly. And I find that creeps up on me on so many occasions, and I have to learn to own that. And so I don't think I was ready for the success that came with the play. I was definitely not ready for the success when the TV show happened. And that played out in so many different ways of also silencing myself and not speaking up in a way that I felt was a better representation of my work, because I just didn't feel that I had the expertise to be able to voice my opinion. So even when I got the TV show, I walked in there in a way that was not ready for my calling at all. Like I walked in there kind of like, oh, thank God they gave this to me. And I hope they don't ever take this away from me. And oh my goodness, they're going to find out that they shouldn't have given this to me. Right. And there was just so much fear attached to it. That in retrospect now, I just feel really sorry for that little girl who I felt was given so much at that time. But I'm also very glad now I'm able to, as a mature woman, and even now I'm working on, another television show. I know I'm a different person because I had the success of the last TV show. And I now know what my voice is and how to express my needs in a way that makes me feel heard and feel respected, whereas before I didn't. And so I think a lot of times you don't know this is your calling or this is what you're supposed to do, or you fall into things. I think about like even the TED Talk, the speaking. Speaking now has become one of my most lucrative streams of my business. And if you had asked me before I did the TED Talk, I would have been like, I'm not a speaker. No, I can't talk. I don't do public speaking. And yet that was a calling that I realized after, when I got the TED Talk and all of these people were saying, oh, can you come and speak about this? Or we want you to be the opening keynote for that. And I was like, who, me? I don't do speaking.
And it's because we're so caught up in that labeling, like you said earlier. Well, how can I be a playwright? Playwrights do X, or they've done this to become that. How can I be a speaker? Yes. But you were already embodying those things.
And you're doing it.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we don't realize we are doing it. And maybe we didn't get that fancy degree, or maybe we didn't get all of the schooling, but we're actually immersed in it and doing it. Like one of the things I learned when I was putting the play together the first time was just around marketing. I never would have called myself someone who was in marketing or promotions, but I knew what I wanted to see on the flyer. I knew how to speak to people. I knew how to write an ad. And it was just kind of something that I was just like, I'm just going to speak how I think I would want somebody to speak to me. And of course, sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong, but it's in that learning you start to get better at it. And, my first talk doesn't look as the same as my talks now, but you start to learn of how to get it right. And just, I think, never turn down opportunity, never say not me. And I always think about that. If they didn't invite me to do the TED Talk, I would never know now that I'm a passionate speaker and I love to speak. And this is something that I love to do.
I always say there's learning in action. It's easy to sit on the side and read about or watch videos or whatever of how to do things or what you think is the way to do it. But nothing teaches, I believe, than being in action.
Exactly. And you learn. And it's so funny. Like I think about, I've now been producing theater for 17 years. And what I've learned along the way of how to put a show together and the mistakes that you make. And sometimes they are costly mistakes. I've lost thousands of dollars, but I've also made thousands of dollars because I learned from that $1,000 mistake. Right. So you just kind of learn as you go along, and don't be scared to just, jump in and do it, because half of the time you're doing it anyways. It's only now that you actually put a value and a price on what you were doing anyways.
Right, exactly. So now, how long was The Kink in My Hair on television? Is it still showing now in reruns or anything?
It's showing in reruns in Canada and also across Africa and the Caribbean and on the African channel, and we're hoping to get it to the US. So that's something that we're really working on. And it did 28 episodes, 2 seasons, and now I'm busy working on my new film. I have a film called How Black Mothers Say I Love You, and I just sold the film rights to that, and that was based on a play as well. And so I'm working on that. Yeah.
So you're working on a film, not another TV show.
Yeah, I'm working on a film, but also spinning that off into a TV show. How Black Mothers Say I Love You. Yeah.
I love it. Now, what is How Black Mothers Say I Love You? What is the vision for that? What is that about? Or what is that exploring as a...
It was something that was very near and dear to my family around separation of mothers from their children. It happens a lot in the Caribbean, where a lot of children, their mothers leave them in the Caribbean and come to America or to Canada. And it was something where when my grandmother was dying, when she was sick, her and my mother had always had a very volatile relationship and very up and down. And when I asked my grandmother, I said to her, I was reading this book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I said to her, I said, Grandma, like, what's the thing that you regret the most in your life? And I was prepared to hear from her, I wish that I went to school, or, I wish I spent more time with my family. And she said, my biggest regret in my life is leaving my children in Jamaica. And she said, especially your mother, because she never forgave me. And my grandmother had left to go to England from Jamaica and left my mother for 6 years. And then when my mother herself, she moved to Canada, she left me in England with my grandmother for 4 years. So I came from this cycle of women who we leave, and we leave our children behind, and we don't seem to ever recover from that leaving. And it was so prevalent in the Caribbean community. And even now, when I was doing research here in Atlanta, I've heard stories of women telling me of, their families leaving them with their grandmothers in the South and then going up north or being raised by mom. That was a common thing.
The mother goes and then they send for you.
Yes. And I think what nobody explored was this reconciliation of how we never recover as a family from that loss, and especially the mother and daughter dynamic. And so that is what How Black Mothers Say I Love You is, looking at a family around separation, loss, and these 3 women of how they dealt with their relationship. So it's very autobiographical, of a lot of pieces of my mother, a lot of pieces of my grandmother. And we staged it last year in Toronto, and it got a great reception, sold out every night. Then it got picked up by another theater company. And then we invited Clement Virgo, and Clement Virgo, he's a director who also, he's the executive producer and creator behind Greenleaf, which is on OWN. He came out to see it, and he just loved it so much, and he optioned the film rights. So that's now what I'm working on right now. And so just last week I got a call from him, and he said, I know you're working on the film, but I was just thinking we could turn this into a TV show too. So I was like, okay. So, and I think too, because family dynamics, and I think especially Black women, we don't see ourselves that often on TV of how do we deal with our mothers. And that is something that is an ongoing pursuit for me, of how do I deal with my mother in a way that feels right for the both of us, right? And so it's a lot of that theme is always in my work at all times. And I think that's why it speaks to a lot of women, because I think it's one of our hardest relationships that we sometimes have, or our most conflicted.
Yes, that's amazing. It sounds amazing. I cannot wait to see it. And it
Thank
also,
you.
yes, of course, and it also resonates for me. The not as much the separation as does just the relationship overall too. I think will be interesting to see. Just because I'm at the stage of, I was just speaking to another guest earlier, but I'm at the stage of the where the child is starting to take care of the parent. You know, that sort of shift, and just seeing it. Even though my mother and my parents, thank God, I always say they're healthy and still moving about, but they need a lot more support than they did, 10 or 20 years ago, of course.
Of course.
So it's just an interesting transition for that time of both of your lives too, for the child and for the parent, when they become more dependent on you. You're making decisions now, like for me with travel and those kind of things, as you would if you had a child. Oh, I can't leave them. I have to make sure this is taken care of. And you're making those decisions for your parents now. And also with your play, your what's going to be your television show. It's interesting too to think about, even, and I never thought of this before, the historical context for people who are descendants of slaves, of being family separation and that kind of trauma that's there too, even starting that early on in our ancestry. So it's a lot of layers there. I'm so interested to see that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we are bringing it to Atlanta, so you will see it.
Excellent.
Bring it across America, so you will see it. Yes.
Cannot wait. Let me know when you're here.
I will, for sure, definitely.
Now, another thing in your TED Talk that you talked about when we mentioned answering the call is that you advise the audience to make sure that when you respond, that it's something that authentically resonates with you. And I think that's something a lot of us may sometimes struggle with. Is this really the thing? Is this the call that I should really answer? So in your experience, how do we know when this is truly authentically for us? Is there a way to know?
I think it's the thing that you would do for free. If nobody paid you a dime or a cent, you would be like, this is what I want to do every single day of my life. And for me, it's around, I always ask myself this question: would I do this for free if there wasn't a dollar value attached to it? And is this part of the legacy that I want to leave behind? And that's been something I think for me around, I've seen just lately, just a lot of young people dying, or people who I went to high school with. And I'm kind of like, wow, nothing is ever promised. And I'm always looking at, what is the legacy that I want people to say about me? And what is the difference that I made in the world? And is this going to do a level of healing for people? Is this going to make a difference? Is this something that I'm going to want my grandchildren's children to talk about years later for me? And it's really important. And I think that's how you get to figure out if this is indeed your most authentic calling. And that's the kind of work that I want to do. Like, I always want to do work that I feel really passionate about, work that I feel is going to make some kind of transformative difference in especially Black women's lives, because that's, for me, is where my heart lies. Is I want to do work that is not usually available or seen for Black women. And so that has been really important to me. A friend of mine said this to me a few weeks ago, and I thought, wow. And she said, Trey, you were doing hashtag Black Girl Magic even before it was popular. She goes, she said, you did the kink in like 2005. And she goes, you were giving us Black Girl Magic. And that was something that really hit home for me. And she said, that's your legacy, that people know that you have this way of just really showing us at our most raw feelings and emotions, but you give us this level of healing and redemption in your work that all of us just feel proud to be Black Girl Magic with you. And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of legacy I want to leave behind, right?
I love that. And now, speaking of Black Girl Magic, or Black girls being in love with themselves, I love that I saw the planner that you recently, well, I don't know if you recently created it, but I recently saw your website, Black Girl in Love, and then you have in parentheses, with herself, the planner. So what inspired you to create this planner, and what makes it different for you than what else is already out there?
Oh, my goodness. I'm sure you can you've had this experience yourself, Elaine. I'm a big planner person. I always buy a planner every year. I'm big on writing goals down as an entrepreneur and saying, okay, what am I doing in my first quarter of my business? What am I doing in my second quarter? How much am I going to make here? And, what are my different streams of income? And I'm writing this down and manifesting it, and I'm affirming, and I'm doing all of these things, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm known for, at the beginning of the year, December 31st, I'm always the person who's like, I'm not going out anywhere because I'm writing down my goals for the next year. And so I would buy these planners every year. And last year, I actually was like, no, I'm not buying a planner. And the reason why I decided that I wasn't going to buy a planner is because I felt nothing in the industry spoke to me. So I kind of was boycotting planners. It was really, nobody was affected by it but me.
Right, right.
But I was like, I'm no longer giving my money to the planning industry because I was like, there's no diversity. It doesn't show any women of color. I said, it doesn't speak to me. There's no pictures or illustrations of us. I said, I just wanted to see something that spoke to me as a Black woman. And so what I did then that year is I kind of started to create like this makeshift planner where I would write down all of my favorite quotes in there. I would write down my affirmations, and I would write down my meetings, and I would cut out pictures of Black women and put it all together. And then sometimes I would pull it out in a meeting, and it wasn't like the best thing, right? It really wasn't, because there was me trying to pull together this thing. And people would ask me, where did you get your planner? Or, oh, I love that you have quotes in it. I love that this is a quote by a Black woman. And then my partner said to me one day, she said, like, why don't you just make your own damn planner? Like, it's pretty much, you keep saying that you're boycotting planners.
Right. Your this solo boycott. What are you doing? Make a planner.
And so she was just like, make your damn own. And so I was like, wow. And it was one of those things, again, where I had never done anything like this before. But I started to ask, my closest girlfriends and friends, and I was just like, what would you want to see in a planner? Like, what would you want to see? And all of them were just like, I want a space where I could put my calls and meetings. I would want a space where I could write down my goals for eating and exercise, my self-care goals. And one of the biggest things which I loved is someone said to me, I want a space for Black girls' dreams. And so I created in the planner pages, which are called Black Girl Dreaming Spaces. There's a thing called Bad Gal Quotes, because I'm Jamaican, and I used to always say anytime right. So I wanted to have that Jamaican flavor, because anytime someone said something, I'd be like, boy, that gal's a bad gal. Right?
I love it.
So I have like quotes from like Zora Neale Hurston to Serena Williams, from Oprah Winfrey, from Issa Rae, and just other Black women who are business women who I really admired. I wrote their quotes down, and so they're under Bad Gal Quotes. There's an affirmation to start your week every week. One of my favorite things, which I love in the planner, is my bold ask or action. And that is something that people always used to say to me, what do you think is the secret to your success? And I would be like, every single week, I push myself to ask something of someone, which is bold, that I feel like, they have the possibility of saying no, or maybe I have too much audacity to ask, but I'm going to be it. And so I put that space in, what's your bold ask for the week? And then what I love at the end of each month, it's called Girl Clap for Your Damn Self. And it's a space of like, what did your self-care look like this month? How can you step up your A game for next month? What and who are you grateful for? And then you rate your month, and it says, girl, did you slay or nay? And give details and rate out of 10. And what was the outcome of your bold ask or actions? And name 2 things you want to focus on for next month. And it ends with, girl, look at you and all your Black girl magic. And so it's a beautiful, I think it's one of the things where when I talk about legacy, this was something that I remember just when I started to give these out to women and women started to get them. I just did a talk, a school tour where I was talking at 18 high schools and universities, and I brought these planners, and the young girls were just like, oh my goodness. And then I went to a corporation and I gave it out to women who were, CEOs of companies. And they were just like, this is something that I've always wanted. Like, I didn't realize I wanted a Black girl planner.
Right.
And I was
it's so beautiful. I'm looking at it on your website and the illustrations. Who did the illustrations?
It's so fun. That was something that I was very keen. I wanted to make sure that this was something that I hired all Black women to do, or women. And so I met this wonderful woman. This is the power of Instagram and social media, that I kept saying, I want a young Black woman to work on this planner. And I started to type in Black art, and I found this. She's in Turkey, this young Black woman, 24 years old, and she had never done anything of this magnitude. And I brought her on, and I was just like, not only am I going to bring you on to illustrate, but you're also going to get a piece of the pie. Like, every single planner that I sell, as well as the fee that I give you, also you're going to get a cut from it. And that was a business model that was really important to me, of how do we empower each other? How do we make sure that everybody gets something out of what we're trying to create? And so I was very, I just made sure that that was really something that was important to me, to make sure that Black women were behind it and that we were also being empowered financially. And I think for me as an artist, I'm so used to, when I was first starting out, of people being like, oh, you should be just really happy that they hired you and you could do it for free, and the exposure ain't damn well paying your bills.
Right.
Right. So I was just like, I want to give to this woman the way somebody would speak to me that would really empower me as a young unknown artist. What would make a difference? And I was like, she needs to get a cut. Like, she needs to get a cut from every single book, as well as her fee.
That's
so
awesome.
She knows that she's worthy of it, and that we're selling it to other Black women. And you also know then that is also happening. And we also donate 10% of our proceeds to a Black organization or someone who's doing work. So this year, this month's proceeds are going to the hurricane efforts in Antigua. So that was really important to me, to make sure that happened. Yeah.
That's amazing. And she's in Turkey, your illustrator said? That's amazing.
Yeah, she's in
love
Turkey.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
Women empowering women. That's what it's all about. Supporting each other and figuring out ways too, the creative ways, of course, because you're a creative, but creative ways to not only support each other, but showing each other's work and featuring each other, including each other. I love it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful planner. I know everybody listening wants to know where it is. I'll have a link to it, but it's blackgirlinlovewithherself.com, right?
Yes, so blackgirlinlovewithherself.com, or you could just go to blackgirlinlove.com. It will lead you
blackgirlinlove.com.
So blackgirlinlove.com will lead you right to the planner, and there's everything there on the site around the planner. There's also, we're doing a retreat in October for Black entrepreneur women who want to, it's called Women on Your A Game. That's also happening in October. So that is also on the website for women who want to network, but also have a 5-star retreat getaway and network with other like-minded women in Florida. And so we're at this beautiful resort, which is in Florida, Destin, Florida, 5-star resort, which is managed by Sheila Johnson, who used to be the former owner of BET.
Right.
And we're bringing 40 women for us to just sit back, relax, chill, network, have some wonderful meetings, and also some spa time, and just relax, like putting away our phones for a bit and just getting together. So you can register for that as well.
Awesome. So all of that, I'll have links to it, but blackgirlinlove.com. I can't believe you got that URL. That's good. I'm very big on domain names.
Yes, I didn't think it was
that
available.
Is something. I have like 30 something, 40 domains. I think I counted the other day. That is good.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I'm shocked it was available. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Like, no, it won't be available. And it was. There
the
was
universe
Black Girl
knew
in Love.
that was your calling. It's like, all right, I'll let her have it.
Yes.
Awesome. So just a couple more questions. I'm curious, what would, especially after you went through your experience where you ended up in the hospital from juggling all of these things by yourself and trying to quote unquote make things happen, what does your support network look like now?
That is a great question. I think for me, it has been around really asking for support and knowing that for my business to grow, I remember once my partner said to me, you have a very successful business, but sometimes you run it like a mom and pop's shop. And it could be like one of the biggest brands out there. And in order for it to grow, you need to let go of things. You don't have to be in everything. But I'm also big on, it has to have the Trey Anthony stamp. It has to have that Trey Anthony flair. It has to have my thing. And I realized that I had to trust people to be able to do their job and let people do their job in order for my business to grow. So that's something that I'm finding now, that I finally hired on an assistant, because believe it or not, I used to answer every single email myself. Right?
Wow.
So, oh yeah. And I was just like, I just want my fans to know I'm accessible. I just want people to know I care. And so I had this thing of, I want to answer everything. And then it became too much, right? Mm-hmm. So that was something. I also hire quite a lot of freelancers. That has been something that has been really important to me. So I use Upwork a lot to hire like graphic designers for my flyers. I also recently just hired a publicist, which was something, because I was being like, I know how to write a press release. I know. And I've learned the lesson of, just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you need to do it.
Exactly. That's right. Doesn't mean you should do it. Right.
And so I was that person who was like, well, and even when I hired my publicist, who also is a dear friend of mine, who's been in the media for many years and knows me, one of the things she said, I want you to let me do my job. Mm-hmm. And she said, I want that promise from you. She goes, I do not want you second guessing things. She goes, I want a separate email from you. I will CC you on things that you need to know about. And I want access to your schedule, but you do not need to be calling people or following up. And that was really hard for me to let go. And, even sometimes I'm being like, oh, well, I do know so-and-so. I could just send her an email. And she's like, no, that's my job.
Right. That's the thing about support, too, is trusting that it's going to show up for you, right, in all these ways. You don't, but that you come, as you told us in your beautiful story that you shared just about your whole journey, that's who you are, the person who handles everything.
Yes.
And takes care of everyone else.
And that is something that you have to let go of sometimes. And I think also the other big lesson I learned was around producing. I used to hire people who were really fun, or people who I liked, or people who reminded me of myself. And I realized now, and it's in the last 2 years, I hired a really great producer who's my right-hand girl, who works with me on everything I do. But she has a business sense and a way with numbers and a way to tell me no of no, this actually isn't going to work because it's, eating into our bottom line. And to hire someone who has the skills that you may not necessarily possess, because budgets and all of those things, yes, I know how to look at them and understand them, but I don't want to be doing them. I also don't want to be the one booking rehearsal space anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be the one, getting the graphic designer together for the flyers. And so it was, I think, if there's one thing that I've learned in business now, is hire people who have the skill set that you don't have.
Right.
Right. And there are people who really love numbers and budgets and all of these other things. Right.
Let people operate in their own superpower, their own magic, and you do in yours.
Yeah. Yes. So that has been hard for me to let go, but I'm still a very, very hands-on, very small operation. And I pride myself on that, because I think I know what's going on in my business. It's really important to me. I feel people who come out to my shows or attend any of my events, they come because there's this personal connection to me, and they know me, and they feel that I'm going to give them the truth. And they know it doesn't matter from when I was doing shows, which were in a 30-seat theater, to 2,000-seat theater. I'm still the same person, and they know that. And so I still want to be accessible in a way, but also accessible in a way that also makes sense for me as well. Because before, I think people had way too much access to all of me, right? So It's a way to figure that out.
So then, in closing, Trey, if you think over your life and career, and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be, and what would you say?
Oh my God, one! I really would say and I'm torn between my grandmother and Oprah Winfrey. I really am. And the reason why I say this is because Oprah has been such a huge influence on my life. I remember, as I said to you, being 12 years old and going home and looking after my brother and sister. And I remember turning on the TV every single day at 4 o'clock before I put the shake and bake chicken in the oven to feed my brother and my sister, of watching this woman on TV and thinking she looks like me and it's possible to be on TV. And I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I've been an Oprah fanatic of studying her and how she has just expanded her brand and what she has done as a businesswoman and how she's owned things. That was something that was really important to me, as even when I was selling my shows, of do I need to sell the show, or can I self-produce it and make more money in that way if I self-produce it? If I become an executive producer on my TV show, even though they were just telling me that I didn't have the experience, why is that important? And I saw that Oprah always said, own everything. Mm-hmm. And so that is a lesson that has stayed with me for the longest time. And then I'm going to sneak in really quickly my grandmother.
Sneak in your I love that your grandmother is equal with Oprah. I think that's fantastic, or even higher. Yes, I love it.
I will sneak her in because my grandmother was a woman who had a grade 3 education. And, she ran a chicken farm. She then, she sold eggs. She sold chickens. And then when she was in England, she ran an import business of, selling car parts and shipping them back to Jamaica. Then she ran a taxi service. And my grandmother, she died with nearly $1 million estates. This is a woman who had no education and grew up in poor Jamaica, walking around bare feet. And I think I always just learned from her that nothing is impossible. And she was so brave. Like, I think about all of the time of her leaving Jamaica and being on a boat for 18 days, going to a country that she knew no one, and just deciding that this is what she needed to do to have a better life for herself and for her children. And so sometimes, even in my moments when I'm really scared, I always think, your grandmother went on a damn boat for 18 days with no money in her pocket to a country she never knew, and she showed up. So what are you scared of? Mm-hmm. What are you really scared of, right? So she has been really that source of inspiration for me for around what it looks like when you show up as a brave woman.
I love it. Trey, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your story and just being so open too, and sharing your journey, really, not even just your story, your journey with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Like I said, I'm such a huge fan of your work, and it's been an honor. I just love your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm actually driving from Nashville to Atlanta on Friday, and I already have downloaded all your episodes to listen in my car.
Oh, you're so great. Thank you. Oh, that makes me so happy. Now,
I love it.
Thank you. Now, I know thank you. Now, as I said, everyone I know is going to want to know how to get in touch with you, find out more about everything that you're up to. So I'll have links, but tell everyone so they know where to go.
Sure. Please go to blackgirlinlove.com. You can also find me under Trey Anthony on Facebook. I have a fan page, so look for my fan page because my other personal page is full. So look for the Trey Anthony fan page. I'm on Instagram under Black Girl in Love, Trey Anthony, and Twitter, I'm under Trey Anthony. I'm not so good with Twitter, but you can find me. Facebook and Instagram, I'm there, and I'm doing well. But Twitter, I'm still trying to figure this out.
That's okay. Don't have to be everywhere. The ones where your people are is the best
So
one.
My people are definitely on blackgirlinlove.com and on Facebook and Instagram for sure.
And then Trey is for everyone, Trey Anthony.
Yes, Trey Anthony, yes.
Trey, thank you again so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate the work you're doing. Very proud of you.
Thank you.
I just love what you're doing. Thank you ever so much.
All right. Before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
Ooh, a parting piece of it. I say my biggest thing is do it even when you're not ready. it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be just right. And always say to yourself, what would happen if I showed up as a brave woman? What would a brave woman do? And so walk through the fear, dive in at the risk of even drowning. That is something that someone had written to me once in a letter, and she said, dive in at the risk of maybe drowning. And it's something that stayed with me. And I really liked that. Yeah.
Powerful. Trey, thank you. Hold on just a moment. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Trey Anthony. So inspiring. I hope you were as inspired as I was. Now, to get a copy of Trey's beautiful planner, Black Girl in Love with Herself, a lifestyle planner, it's gorgeous. The illustrations are amazing, as I mentioned in this episode. I have a copy I'm keeping for myself, but I have one for you too. To get your copy, what I want you to do is leave a review for the podcast. You know, I love to hear from you all. So leave a review. Let me know what you thought of this episode, what you think of the show overall. But it'd really be great if you can tell me what you got from this episode with Trey. Leave a review wherever you're listening, especially if you're on iTunes, if you're on Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you're listening, leave a review for the podcast. Now, you know I love a 5-star review, but any feedback is appreciated. So let us know what you thought about this episode and what lesson did you get from this episode? What are you taking with you? Leave a review. The first person to leave a review will get a copy of Black Girl in Love with Herself. I'll reach out to you, get in touch with you, and you will get a copy. Black Girl in Love with Herself, a planner. It's beautiful. I will mail it to you. It's all on me. Just leave a review and let us know what you think. Now, to find out more about Trey and to get in touch with her and to find out where you can purchase Black Girl in Love with Herself, go to supportissexypodcast.com. Go to the search icon at the top and just type in Trey, Trey. Her show notes page will pop up with links, resources, all the ways to get in touch with her and how you can purchase the planner. So I'm only mentioning the review part on the podcast. The first person, leave a review, you'll get your copy. But for everyone else that goes to the show notes page, there's a link there so that you can purchase it. We're supporting Trey and we're supporting the woman who did the beautiful illustrations. All right. So as always, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And until next time, I want you to remember, you deserve support. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.